Absence. Do we have any apologies for absence today?
None.
And disclosures of interest. Do we have any disclosures of interest that are relevant to this particular meeting here today? Yes, Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Lydia. Yes. Item 9, the new serious violence prevention strategy. I don't know whether I need to disclose or not, but my daughter Amy Hilton is a domestic abuse commissioner for Warwickshire County Council.
Okay. And Councillor Coles.
Thank you. Item 10, it is on the register already, but I am a trustee of Stratford Town Trust.
Any, do you, not Councillor, Marcia Eccleston, the Head of Law and Governance Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Chair. The declarations, as they are stated, provided they come to the meeting with no interest at all, which they've stated, then we can continue.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of March. Have we got any comments that need to be made on those minutes? Councillor Curtis, just...
Thank you, Lydia. Yes, on page 2, I just wonder, the final paragraph, it says, during the discussion on this item, clarity on the 2.2 million set aside for the council plan actions. Should that read set aside for the council plan and change programme actions?
I think you're correct on that one. Okay. Any other comments? If not, can we adopt those minutes? Can I have a proposer? Councillor Coucher. Seconder, Councillor Curtis. Moving on then, the first item to be referred to Council is item 4, which is the Development Requirements Supplementary Planning Document, SPD Part L Open Space, which comes under Councillor Coucher. But I would just like to say before I begin, I'm glad that we're now seeing a resolution here, because I brought the residents of Kinnerton Farm Road here to present their petition and present a case on this one, I think something like 3 to 4 years ago. So thank you for getting this across the line. Councillor Coucher.
Thank you very much indeed. This has been one of our key priorities to try and resolve. The deployment of management companies in the district is universally reviled, and what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're not going to build on that problem going forward. And so the purpose of this report is basically about how we are proposing that open space public open space should be managed when developments have been completed. And I'm pleased to very strongly support the view that we should be working as closely as we possibly can do with parish and town councils for them to take on that responsibility, and obviously the commuted money that goes with it. Failing that, the district council would work to take on those responsibilities, and only in the very last resort, and we hope it'll never happen, should it actually be still in the hands of a management company. Management companies which seem to be owned very much by the development industry, and therefore we don't see the separation of responsibilities there. They have very little accountability, and for many residents who are living in developments covered by management companies, they're having to pay what they feel is 2 lots of council tax, one to the management company and one obviously for the rest of the services they get, which is felt to be very prejudicial. We can't do anything retrospectively about the existing management companies that are in existence at the moment without the agreement of both those organisations and indeed any other body to take on the responsibility. But this is very much about how we're going to deal with things going forward for the future to ensure that we do provide developments which are appropriate for the district and where we're not penalising new residents coming in to live here.
And it is very apposite that the Competition and Market Authority produced a report on this in February 24, where they actually came to almost the same conclusions. Their conclusions were that The charges are often high and unclear to our homeowners. They made some rather strong comments about the workmanship that was often carried out and the cost. And they actually were, I was very surprised at some of the comments that were made in that competition and management markets authority about that if the status quo is maintained, aggregate detriment is likely to worsen over time. They had some very, very strong comments to make. So I think we are pushing at an open door on this one, but anything that's retrospective will have to be dealt with by government. But this is our putting our marker down that this is not something we want to support in this area. So thank you very much indeed for your work on that one. We have recommendations to put to council, recommendations 1 and 2. Are you proposing that those 2 be put forward?
Indeed.
And I'll second those 2. And any other comments that anybody wants to make? If not, then go to the vote. All in favour? I'm in favour. Thank you very much indeed, and let's hope that this is something that is now taken up at a national level. Thank you very much indeed. Next item is the item 5, which is the Stratford-upon-Avon Gateway Site Framework Master Plan Supplementary Planning Document, the SPD there, and this is over to Councillor Coucher as well.
Thank you. We obviously undertook considerable public consultation about our SPD for this site, and we did receive quite a number of representations, including a petition, which I think was really got up out of some misinformation that had actually gone forward in terms of what would happen to an important building at the top of Henley Street. We've redrafted the master plan to take account of relevant comments that have been made, and I think we now have got a document that is very fit for purpose, and hopefully we can take that forward to get the investment we need for this very, very important site for Stratford. So I would certainly move the recommendation in relation to the new master plan. I've just got my prestige copy just been given to me by officers earlier on today, which is great.
Thank you. Have we got any comments that anybody wants to make to that? Any comments at all on the SPD? We have 2 recommendations to go to council, and that it be adopted and that delegated authority be given to the head of development in consultation with the portfolio holder to make minor editorial changes to the Gateway Master Plan SPD should they be required. Could I please put it on record that we give our thanks to the officers that have been involved in this, because it's been a big piece of work, a lot been done, but I think it's an exemplary piece of work. So thank you very much, and just let's hope that will lead to be able to get the investment that is needed to be able to produce the outcome. Have we got anybody that is want to make any other comment? If not, who's going to second this? Councillor Gist? Oh, sorry, I did ask whether anybody wanted to make any comments.
I know that significant efforts have been made in order to secure funding for this from external bodies. What is your goal for this now, should that external funding not be granted? And, you know, we must pay tribute to all of the hard work. And I know you have, of officers and councillors over several years who've been working very hard on this matter. But it is now clear that we have reached some sort of, well, a financial obstacle in funding for this. And what is going to happen now moving forward if the funding can't be secured? That this document is very impressive, but comes to naught if the funding is not available in order to do the transformation. Thank you.
I think some of the problems are, unfortunately, lie political problems elsewhere that are not under our control, and that is with the West Midlands Combined Authority is one of the key bodies that we have been working with, and we've been working very, very hard with them, and we hope for a very positive outcome. But we cannot rely upon other people making the decisions, because it's not in our hands for that one particular piece of funding that might open the doors there. Anybody else want to make any particular comment on that?
Just clarify, Leader, what we have in front of us today is the supplementary planning guidance document for the future development of the site. That is separate to the actual delivery then of the site itself. This sets out the planning principles for the site as we move forward. So whatever happens in relation to the funding request that we've got at the Combined Authority, this document will stand as a material planning consideration.
It will guide anything that will happen on this site. Once it's adopted, anything that will happen on this site will be guided by this document. I think I'm correct in saying that. Okay. So we've got a proposer, a seconder to that we had, Councillor Gist. And are we all in favour of adopting this SPD? Thank you very much indeed, we are. The next item is on the notice of motion for the ecological emergency biodiversity, which is on page 97. And this also is Councillor Coucher.
I think this notice of motion was extremely well timed, given where we are with regards to ecology, and clearly so much that we have to do in the district about maintaining our environment. I would congratulate Councillors Passingham and Ostrander for raising this, because actually I think it's been very useful indeed. We have a report in front of us which suggests that we should be supporting the highlighting of the ecological emergency that we've got. And we have a series of responses to that. I am particularly pleased to see that we are appointing a green spaces officer, which I think is a very positive thing that we are doing here to actually be looking after our green spaces. And I hope that officer will be working as part of the team supporting town and parish councils as well, because so much of the green space actually lies within the remit of those bodies going forward. So I think in summary, I think we should support the notice of motion that was put forward and the responses that are set out in this report.
And you're moving that, right. I will second it. One of the things that I think we need to do more of is to communicate a lot of the work that is already ongoing, because a lot of the things that came out from this were things that were already happening or even done within the council, but we don't always publicise, we don't always talk about the kind of work that is being done. And it is really important that this has now raised the profile of the ecology and biodiversity, and that we've actually got that accepted now as part and parcel of what the council does. So I really do think that is beneficial. Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, I'd just like to also reiterate the importance of having a dedicated green spaces officer to help deliver this plan. I think that's a really welcome move. Thank you, Leader.
Councillor Grocott.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, again, a very good paper. I'd just also like to say that, you know, from the grounds work contract was part of the tendering for that was also looking at our ecological and biodiversity targets as well. So that was to be reflected, and we'll be working with that with our contractor to ensure that that is supported moving forward. Thank you.
And it's really, for me, again, it's really good to see it come forward. I did actually move the declaration of an ecological emergency, which was not accepted at the time. So I'm glad to see that this is now coming through. So we've got the recommendations that it be supported, and that the responses, as summarised in part 1 and 2, as set out in part 1 and summarised in part 2, are endorsed. Do we all agree to that, accepting that? Okay, thank you. Moving on then, we've got matters for decision by the Cabinet, and the first one is the Strategic Risk Register, which comes under myself, and this is the Strategic Risk Register attached to Appendix 1 be reviewed, and that consideration be given if any further action should be taken to manage the risks facing this organisation. Again, have any questions that anybody wants to raise at this point on any of the items? Councillor Coucher.
I just wanted to raise the issue of staff sickness, which clearly is of great concern to us and obviously to the individual members of staff concerned. I'm assuming we do monitor this fairly regularly, because clearly, obviously, that's a great risk to us if our staff are not here because they're not well enough to work. Then we can't deliver what we're wanting to do. So I just wanted some assurance that we are looking at that, because staff sickness does seem to be an issue for this authority.
Chairman, thank you. Chair, sorry, pardon me, thank you. Absolutely give those assurances. The staff sickness is monitored by both the JCNG and the Employment Committee, as well as the Council's management team. We are actually below the target, which is good for the staff sickness this year, as we were last year as well.
And that is good to note. So we have the latest version of the Council's Strategic Risk Register. Councillor Wally-Huggins.
Yes, I'm very alarmed by the staff absence level and sickness rate as well. And I wondered if there is any comparisons from previous years so that we can see if, if there's an improving situation or if in fact it's worsening. I think those are, that information is important to have to hand.
I think that information was available, and I think it has been reported through the JCNG and those committees, so they will be in those papers, the reports from the ongoing sickness. I think I'm correct in that it is regularly reported.
Chairman, that is the council side of the business, but if it's helpful, I can do that by way of an information sheet to all councillors.
I don't recall comparisons with previous years on the documents I've received, but it would be useful to see those. Thank you.
Councillor Rock.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a very important point. But I think, as the Chief Executive has said, we do monitor these sort of things. The staff welfare is very important to us. This is something that falls within the remit of the Employment Committee that was discussed at some length, the welfare of the state and the employment staff strategy. I think my experience has been in business over many years. These things like bosses all come at once in certain pockets, and it can give an impression that things are going in one direction globally when perhaps they're not. And I think the answer is in the statistics. And I think if the Chief Executive can provide in future more information on that, it reveal the facts rather than perceptions. Having said that, there is no room for complacency, and I'm sure the management team will be dealing with that. But it is the Employment Committee does look at these matters. Thank you.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Leader. On a different point, on page 116, the impact of cyber threat, there are a number of existing actions mentioned here. I'd just like to take the opportunity to remind all members that there is some excellent training to be had online and that we all have responsibility. It's not just up to the ICT team to ensure that we're safe. It's up to all members to ensure that we are fully compliant. Thank you, Leader.
That is a good point to be made, and thank you very much for making that. It is appreciated. Again, unless anybody's got any further comments, there is a recommendation, and that is that the Strategic Risk Register attached to Appendix 1 be reviewed and consideration be given if any further action should be taken to manage the risks facing the organisation. And 2 items were raised, which will be taken into account. I'm happy to move that recommendation. Anybody? And Councillor Curtis, second the recommendation. And are we prepared to back that recommendation? All those in favour? Okay. Thank you very much indeed for your time on that one. Moving forward is the Single Equality Scheme. And again, that comes under myself. And this one is about the updating originally the diversity policy was introduced in 2007, was replaced by the single equality scheme, and this one addresses and makes sure that we are up to date, because the current scheme expired and it's now necessary to refresh it for a further 4 years, 2024 to 2027. So again, you've got the single equality scheme there. It has expired and it does need replacing. And if anybody's got any comments to make on that, otherwise I will move the recommendation. I'm prepared to move that recommendation. Anybody prepared to second it? Councillor Coles, any other comments that anybody wants to make? I mean, it's excellent that we do have this, but it is something that we have to do anyway, and I fully endorse it. Are we agreed to that recommendation? Thank you. Moving on, then, we have the new serious violence prevention strategy, which comes under Councillor Gist. And this one is about the way in which we're working in partnerships, but I'll leave it over to Councillor Gist to outline the background and what that will involve.
Thank you, Leader. So on the 31st of January 2023, a new statutory duty regarding serious violence came into force, which placed an obligation on specified authorities, of which Stratford District Council is one, to conduct a strategic needs assessment, develop a serious violence prevention strategy, and develop and implement a serious violence delivery plan. Now, the duty doesn't specify a lead authority, but the County Council has taken the lead and prepared a strategic needs assessment and a revised serious prevention strategy. And the strategic needs assessment was submitted to the Home Office on the 24th of January this year. The strategic needs assessment identified 3 areas of concern in Stratford-on-Avon district, one of which is rural domestic violence. It's thought that is underreported. The figures suggest it's underreported. We have a high number of children accessing alternative provision for education, and Stratford Mount Pleasant East has a high risk score for serious violence. So there's some funding that comes from the Home Office for these interventions, and it's administered by the OPCC, and those are set out on the table in the report. So the legislation obliges us to work with our partners, particularly in the South Warwickshire Community Safety Partnership, but I would suggest that we could only tackle serious violence by working with our partners. That's the county-wide Safer Warwickshire Board and the police in particular, to name just a few of them. So I urge Cabinet to adopt the recommendations.
Thank you. Have we got any comments? Councillor Crump.
Again, I think we'll fully endorse this. Obviously, it's under my portfolio at the County Council, and I think we've all got a duty to spread the word, make sure people communicate and report incidents as much as possible. Again, liaising with the police, and whether we can something out in our newsletters that we put out, or press releases, that communication is vital, and if people do have concerns, it's better to report them than on behalf of a friend or relative. It's better to report them and for them to be unfounded than not to be reported, and then we have to face serious consequences. So it's just a request that we all work on this and get as much communication out as possible.
Can I thank you for that? Councillor Rock.
Thank you, Leader. I really want to agree with everything that's just been said, and I think it points up an important element in our council plan, which talks about the collaboration and working with other partners across the spectrum of public services, which in fact was debated at council. And this is a good illustration of how nothing's going to work unless we collaborate with others. I know Mrs. Homer will say how we've been talking about a particular case at the moment, which really involves all sorts of people to try and to address a problem. And it's a good illustration how we need to work with everybody to try and pull things together. So I welcome the report.
Yeah, so do I. The duty, although the duty doesn't specify a lead authority, it is, the consensus is that the County Council is best placed to lead on this one because it covers so many other people, bodies that the probation service, youth offending teams, fire and rescue teams, health integrated care boards. So the County Council's very well placed to lead on that one. But it would be useful maybe over the next year or two that we do have reports back. Is that a message that you could probably take to the county? That it would be useful to have reports from the county, on progress as we go forward.
Yeah, I'm also more than happy that obviously we've spoken about safe accommodation and refuge at the previous minutes. Whether we have an encompassing item at OSC. To bring forward progress, what's happening, initiatives, etc., and the examples of partnership working. So, and then obviously that would again feed back into Cabinet through OSC. So I'm more than happy to deal with that.
That's appreciated. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to thank Sam and Councillor Gist for this report. There's some shocking statistics, particularly on domestic violence in this. A third of recorded violence is domestic related. I'm just very pleased to see the report giving such weight to measures to tackle domestic violence and working in a multi-agency approach. So thank you very much, Councillor Gist.
Councillor Wally-Huggins.
Yes, like Councillor Curtis, of course, I've been very well aware of the levels of serious violence, particularly towards women and young people. But I'm also relieved that Stratford District Council will be working with multiple organisations to ensure that we get the best possible care for these victims. And it also further underlines why the Conservatives made proposals for an uptick in finance to help tackle this very serious problem over and above any other funding that we have. I just regret that it was ignored. Thank you.
Councillor Coles, do you want to say anything at this point?
No, I was just wanted guidance on political statements to do with policing as we're in a period of murder.
Yeah, no. I think we already knew about at the time of the budget, we already knew about this development and what was happening, but it was not something that we were able to say at the time. Marcia Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair. As I understand it, I think Councillor Grocott may have had a question. Sorry. Councillor Coles. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Coles. Just to clarify, speaking about protecting members of the public, policing is necessary business day to day. It's absolutely fine to refer to that. Regarding anything confidential in the papers, it's not so fine to talk about.
And we don't have any intention of looking at anything that's in the confidential part, unless you have any specific questions, in which case we would have to go into private session. Provided that there's nobody raising any other questions, Councillor Gist, are you prepared to propose those recommendations, the two recommendations? I'm happy to second. No, Councillor Grocott, you can second them. And are we all prepared to back the paper? Thank you very much indeed. That's all the agenda. All the Cabinet has backed that agenda item. Thank you very much. The next item is comes under the Environmental and Neighbourhood Services portfolio, and it is the Stratford-upon-Avon Local Nature Reserve. It comes under myself, but also under Councillor Rock as a portfolio holder that covers property. So just to outline that this covers 3 agreements that we have to undertake. And it's like a procurement exercise that has to be undertaken. And once the legal agreements have been undertaken, then we can apply to register the nature reserve as a biodiversity gain site. Councillor Rock, would you like to take it forward?
Thank you very much. Well, I'm not going to say too much because this is broadly a technical report and covers technical matters. This was discussed in a September meeting of the Cabinet and follows on from there. There's various details in it which I think Mr Perks can take us through, not exactly line by line, but and take matters as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rock. Very happy to do that if it will help the Cabinet this afternoon. As you say, this report builds on the decision that you made in September of last year and sort of seeks some sort of technical sort of things to sort of implement that decision. Following your September decision, we have now officially declared the Stratford Nature Reserve. That's been registered with Natural England and the necessary publicity has gone out. So we now officially have a Stratford-on-Avon Nature Reserve. With that comes some obligations to ensure that the reserve is properly managed going forward, and the paper that you have today gives you some of the building blocks to sort of make sure that we can get those in place. As the Cabinet will be aware, the Stratford-on-Avon Nature Reserve is jointly owned between ourselves and the Stratford Town Trust. We both have land holdings within the red line of the reserve, so we need to sort of work together on that. I'll briefly sort of run through what the report is seeking now. It seeks to establish a management steering group with the Town Trust to oversee the management of the Nature Reserve, and that's sort of in line with the decision that you made in September. It sets out in a little bit more detail the membership of the group and the terms of reference for that. So that's the first thing I'm seeking this afternoon. It also seeks to authority to enter into an operating agreement with the Stratford Town Trust, which will allow us to sort of jointly manage land that we own together. It sort of deals with some of the sort of land ownership and boundary issues. Again, that's a largely technical document the lawyers have put together. I'm seeking authority to procure a suitable ecological management contractor to carry out the works required to maintain the reserve. As part of the registration with Natural England, we had to provide a landscape management plan showing how we would ensure biodiversity was maintained on the site and that the habitats were kept up and that we didn't sort of allow biodiversity to degrade over the site. Part of that will require a specialist contractor with sort of boots on the ground to sort of thin reeds and sort of trim things and plant things and ensure that stuff is as it should be. So I'm seeking authority to procure a contractor to do that. And then the sort of the final area is that of biodiversity net gain credits. The site, through the work that we've done so far, has generated a number of biodiversity net gain credits, approximately 70. And I'm seeking authority to market those credits following a suitable evaluation exercise so as we can use the proceeds for that sale to fund the costs of the ongoing maintenance of the nature reserve. Under the biodiversity net gain credit scheme, that the money we raise for that is reserved for use for sort of biodiversity, so we will be sort of funding it back into this site, and should we have any surplus, it will be used for biodiversity net gain elsewhere. And then just at the bottom of the report, the recommendations, there are some administrative delegations I'm seeking just to allow these decisions to be implemented, things like the finalisation of legal documents which are in draft at the moment, and sort of authority to sign those and get things moving. I or Nigel Rock, I'm sure, are happy to take any questions.
Councillor Passingham.
The original habitat survey of the Lench Meadows in 2020, so 4 years ago, said that due to its location, wealth of habitats and connectivity to other sites via the River Avon, this is one of the most important wildlife sites close to Stratford. And the reason it was such an important wildlife site is that for 50 years it's been largely untouched and it's been allowed to rewild itself. And that's created a habitat, a mosaic of habitats that is extremely valuable and is the best site for birds and all sorts of other things in and around Stratford. Over the last few years, 25 years, rewilding has become very well established in environment and conservation circles, and especially since the publication of Isabella Tree's book about rewilding of the Knepp estate, which is a 3,000-acre estate, which we've been to 3 times, and it's a wonderful experience to be in real wild nature rather than manicured nature. And there's also many places now in Scotland, in the Caledonian forests that are now being rewilded, and it's a similar experience up there. Rewilding an area doesn't mean no management at all. It means light touch management. It means helping wildlife and nature re-establish itself. And so over the last 4 years, there has been a lot of friction with the Lench Meadow, the Friends of Lench Meadow, because they think that the original proposals were wildly over-engineered, and it was not going to be anything like restoring of nature or protecting nature. And since then, I think there's been quite a lot of concessions, but the Friends of Lench Meadow still think it's going to be over-engineered. What Middlemarch have proposed in their ecological management plan, it proposes a lot of interventions. If Middlemarch were asked to do a light touch ecological management plan, that would, they think...
But can I just say at this stage that there is no... nobody, this is a procurement exercise, nobody has actually been, it has to go out to procurement before anybody comes in, so we can't name any names because we don't know who this will who will win that procurement.
Right, and a management plan has been put forward by recognised ecologists, but there are more ways than one, a lot more ways than one, to restore nature than by large interventions. And the Friends of Lench Meadows think this is one. I mean, you may not agree with them, but they are the local community in this case, and there's been a lot of friction because they're not being consulted properly along the way. So what I would like to ask is, could the Friends of Lench Meadow be included on this steering group, the management committee? Could another ecological consultancy be asked to produce a light touch management plan, and because of that, could this decision be deferred for further consultation and consideration?
I'll bring in Councillor Harding at the moment, but just out of interest, one of my original degree was ecology, and I actually did research based in the Lake District, which looked at the way in which land recovered after the last ice age, and the way in which the original wilding, if you like, took place. Rewilding can only be properly rewilding when it's got wild animals involved, and that's how the land was managed and how proper. There is no such thing as rewilding that's actually just left to wild. They bring in animals that will manage the landscape. So there is no such thing as just leaving things completely because what the research that I did at the time showed quite clearly that what happens if you don't get wild animals grazing is you just get a takeover of brambles and trees, and you lose the whole area. This was a former town tip. I actually do appreciate the work of the Friends of the Lench Meadows. I actually spoken to them and spoken to one particular person there. And I think they would appreciate being part of any future group that would take part. But we're not at that stage. At this moment, we're talking about the procurement, going out to procurement for the agreement on how this would be taken forward. Councillor Harding.
Thank you. Thanks. First of all, last year I thought it looked absolutely fantastic with all the wildflowers that were planted there. And the extra soil that was brought in helped to cover up the detritus that was being excavated from the old council tip site. So a lot of problems were solved with that. It's great for insect life. BNG, though, my first impressions is if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And this strikes me as being a bit like the carbon credit scheme, where a developer can sort of cause havoc, destroy other nature reserve areas by and assuaging their conscience by buying BNG credits here. So it's almost a developer's charter, because I think build, 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 and then just offset it with this. So I'm not sure we should be encouraging that. The credits from this, I'm told, are 170,000 over 5 years, which seems an extraordinary amount of money. I mean, what are we proposing to do there for that? That doesn't strike me as light touch. It would probably be re-engineering already existing wildlife sites. I mean, we've got 3 red-listed birds in there. I was told in a meeting last June that there would be no further encroachment in the northern section, where the long grass was. This is an area which is good for cover for larger animals, badgers, foxes, deer, etc. I really don't think that should be disturbed anymore or made into pathways and things through there. We should just leave it as it is. The area is also suffering from creeping urbanisation already, because we've got street lighting going in on the so-called safety scheme on the A439, and the Bat Conservation Trust says this is extremely disturbing for bats. So I don't know what we can do about that. It's probably too late to do anything. Will other local nature reserves be subject to BNG? Welcome Hills, for example, will that be covered? Finally, will the Town Trust have representation on the steering committee? And again, I support Councillor Passingham's suggestion that the Friends of Lench Meadows should be included. And finally, what scrutiny do we have for this? Is there any independent scrutiny of this once the work's being done? Thank you.
Can I bring in the Deputy Chief Executive, who will be able to answer quite a lot of those questions?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, there are a few things raised there. I'll try and cover, I've tried to make notes as I go through, so I'll try and sort of cover them off. Starting with Councillor Passingham's point, I do recognise the statement you started with. It comes from a citation that was produced on the Lench Meadows by Warwickshire County Council's ecologist, and it's an accurate repetition of the first sentence of it. What I don't think has been fully expressed to the Cabinet is that it's actually a sort of whole paragraph. It does say that it's an important wildlife site close to Stratford, and it then goes on to say, therefore, it is vital that a suitable management plan, derived with the help of WCC ecologists, is adopted and work begun as soon as possible before some of the more valuable habitats deteriorate too much. Urgent work should include restoring the northern river meadow to an MG4 flood meadow, an annual cut, introduction of green hay from suitable SSSI donor meadows, restoring ponds, eradicating invasive alien plants, laying out a network of official paths. There's some talk then about sort of clearing some of the scrub and removing some of the dominant species, diversifying by putting in a series of scrapes and ponds to help protect otters and water voles and to hold back sort of river water. So there's quite a lot of suggestions. Whilst it does fully recognise what Councillor Passingham said, there are a number of suggestions as to what should be done there, and those form the basis of the interventions we carried out as part of the scheme design. The citation was very helpfully provided to us by the Friends of Lench Meadows, and we've tried to sort of stick to that in the scheme design going forward, and in the management plans that we've proposed by Middlemarch Environmental, who are the sort of commercial arm of the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust, so the closest we could get to the WCC ecologists who no longer carry out this type of work. So we've tried to sort of follow as closely as we can the recommendations of that citation and intend to going forward. Picking up sort of the real wilding point that Councillor June had raised, I think one of the things when we talked to Natural England about this was this is very much an edge of town nature reserve, and different locations suit different types of nature reserves. Some can be wilder, but where Natural England felt the best value could be achieved here was introducing sort of people to nature, sort of on the edge of town, getting people out into the wonderful sort of benefits for health and well-being that nature can provide. The points about biodiversity net gain credits and the developer's charter, there is always a risk of that with such schemes as this that has been safeguarded to a point, by the legislation, which means that the first duty is for the developer to provide the biodiversity improvements sort of on site, and they need to clearly demonstrate why they can't do that. There are some sites, particularly urban sites, where it's going to be quite difficult to achieve all of the biodiversity net gain credit requirements. So this is an opportunity for them to, rather than get away with it, is to provide it in an area more suitable. It's still developing legislation, so as with all things, we'll have to see how that develops. So I hope that's sort of helpful to the Cabinet today. The street lighting on the Warwick Road falls outside of the nature reserve scheme, so unfortunately I have no control and can't sort of comment on that. In terms of using the funding for the Welcome Hills and other nature reserves, yes, we have 3, I think, nature reserves within Stratford-on-Avon district. We have the Stratford Nature Reserve, the Welcome Hills, and a nature reserve out in Ulster. There is, as I sort of said, I've said sort of 2 things on this already, really. The biodiversity net gain credit legislation is not sort of finalised, so we're still waiting for sort of final versions. All the indications that we have are that any funding that we raise through the sale of these credits will need to be spent on biodiversity. It's important that we sort of properly fund the maintenance of the Stratford Nature Reserve, but any surplus could be directed to the other nature reserves that we have. We have existing sort of budgets for sort of maintaining those, but there would be the potential for enhancing sort of those, and this money would be eligible to be used there. In terms of the steering group, Stratford Town Trust will have a place at the steering group. It's proposed that there are 3 members from the District Council and 3 members from the Town Trust. It's obviously for the Cabinet to decide, but I would counsel against sort of inviting people who are not elected or not part of the landowning association onto that steering group, because the representation through a democratic process is they vote for the council will then make the representations, and I'd be keen the democratic element was maintained through the council rather than the direct appointment of one group, because it's then if we take one group, which groups do we turn down? And by declaring the nature reserve, you have taken on a statutory duty to carry out certain works, and we need to make decisions quickly and efficiently in that forum, which is why I've suggested that we make a sort of subset of 6 people to form the steering group to allow us to make expedient decisions in accordance with the legal obligations that you've taken on. I think that's all the points that I picked up, but if I've missed any, I'm happy to come back.
Okay, Councillor Crump, and then Councillor Rock.
Thanks, Al. I think Councillor Harding and I were singing from the same song sheet today. I was concerned about localism. I think whether some local input could be incorporated, being they on a consultative basis or ad hoc basis. I think that's always beneficial. My point relates to scrutiny. Obviously, we're talking about £170,000 worth of money. We're talking about in paragraphs 5.3 to 5, where it's an emerging market, and there's going to be some appraisal of the options. So again, perhaps from an open scrutiny point of view, we'd perhaps like to see some of the scrutiny, some of the appraisal options, and some of the decisions whether to sell them straight away or do it on a phased basis, and the rationale behind them. So we're not disagreeing with the process, but we'd like to see how robust the process is and what can be scrutinised and whether we're getting best value both in terms of financial and also in terms from an environment point of view as well. So just some potential future item for overview and scrutiny. I would suggest whether the Cabinet would be agreeable to that. That was just a thought and a comment.
Yes, the person who's got the most expertise on the BNG, biodiversity net gain is actually the County Council's ecologist. It would be worth having a word with him because he's done a lot of work in this area, particularly at Olscott. It might be worth having a word with him and discuss some of this with him because he's got a wealth of experience in this area. He's been driving most of the work in this county. So Councillor Rock and then...
Could I just come back on Councillor Crump's first point? As part of our declaring the nature reserve, we have undertaken to set up a Friends organisation. So within that will link into the steering group, and I think that would be the appropriate mechanism for the Friends of Lench Meadows to get their feed in and anybody with a local interest to have a direct route into the ongoing management. Sorry, I should have mentioned that in my introduction, but I forgot.
I thought you missed it out, so I deliberately prompted you there, Tony.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that one because in Ulster we have a nature reserve there, and we've got a Friends of the Nature Reserve, which works extremely closely with the management and the district on managing that site as volunteers. It works extremely well. Councillor Rock, and then Councillor Curtis, then Councillor Passingham.
Thanks very much. And in fact, that last point was the one I was firstly going to make. Just a few points. I think all the points that I made are absolutely worth noting. However, we have to look at the decision we've got on the recommendations in front of us. And I think we're looking to some other things that might happen later on. And at the moment, we're talking about setting up the arrangements to deal with it. And that's a good example there that the steering group can consider those inputs when it's been established. This is to establish those mechanisms. So I would suggest we actually concentrate on the recommendations and the decision we're taking. And if you look at point 4, it says this is we're taking the decision to make the Deputy Chief Executive make the necessary temporary arrangements. I think one point that's come out of that is the question. I'm a bit concerned about a highway scheme that's going to interfere with the concept of what we're trying to do, and I wonder if there's some mechanism where we can make representation to the Highways Authority, even if it's shielding lights and all that sort of thing. If we're setting up an important wildlife site here and then it gets jiggered up by another public authority, we don't look too good. So I think that's something I would ask officers to take away. I don't know whether we need a recommendation to do that, but I think that's an excellent point. The question about the BNGs, I know there is concern about manipulation of them by housing developers and all that sort of thing. We're not a housing developer. There's an opportunity here to bring some financing to do the scheme that we will have under democratic control here with a proper mechanism. And it can only be used for those ways. We are not intending to look for wrinkles and abuse it and all the rest of it. If there's money coming in, we're going to use it. But well, I hope to think, well, this cabinet is in control or further cabinets are in control. I can't see us wanting to do that of whatever political colour. So whilst the scheme may have its potential flaws, I think if we're going to have any sort of management, be that light touch or whatever it is, we're going to need some money to do that, and that's a way of bringing it in. The other thing I would say is I'm looking at recommendation 6. The implication perhaps needs to be spelled out is that it does come back for further democratic control. Councillor Crump was talking about possibly coming back to scrutiny or maybe coming back to that cabinet. I looked to what other members of the cabinet said, but for number 6, it seems to be an implication there that it will come back for further controls once we've got this set up. But whether we need to spell that out or not, I don't know, and I don't know whether Mr. Perks would like to comment on that. But those are the points I wanted to make. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Curtis, and then we'll come back on, and then Councillor Passingham, and then we'll come back to officers and myself for final recommendation.
Thank you. I think actually Mr. Perks, Councillor Rock and yourself have more or less said what I was going to say. And I noticed that the steering group includes the portfolio holder with the responsibility for finance. But I was just going to suggest, and it's been made, that presumably that steering group would be able to invite input and invite any other experts, other groups to come along, but that's been made already. So,
Councillor Passingham.
Yeah, I accept Mr. Perks's reading of the report about that management is needed, and I think the discussion is going to be more about heavy management or light management. What Mr. Perks read out, I consider could be light touch management. And I was studying the ecological management plan last night, the proposed one, and there was a lot of planting schemes in it. There was a lot of interventions which, to me, look like a heavy one. I mean, all Lynch Meadows are asking for, the Friends of Lynch Meadows are asking for, is for this to be reviewed and options to be considered. And taking on the other points is could they? I take the point again about democracy on this steering group, but the Friends of Lynch Meadow could be observers and permanently on it rather than invited on occasions. And the more community engagement that there is on things like this, because as we were discussing earlier, there is a climate emergency. The environment is extremely important to all of us if we're not going to have an ecological collapse. So the more that the public and the community are involved in these sort of decisions, the better.
Thank you very much indeed. The letter from the Friends of the Lynch Meadow has been circulated, so we are aware of the content of that letter. Could I make it very clear that what we're doing today is agreements? The agreement is about a management steering group, an operating agreement, a management agreement, and a Section 106 planning agreement, and then the necessary registration for biodiversity net gain. But the principal ones are the agreements, which then will allow for more discussion about the final what exactly will be in that, depending on the procurement, what will be in that management. But today is about deciding to start going out to that procurement process. Anybody else, do you want to come in at that point?
If that's okay, Leader, before you sum up, I'll just make sure I've covered up the last points that were raised from my notes. In terms of financial appraisal and scrutiny, we have the portfolio holder for resources on the steering group, and the Section 151 officer is a key consultee, but I'd be very happy to expose that to any sort of scrutiny the council saw fit and sort of report back as the Cabinet or the scrutiny committee required. In terms of experts to the steering groups, I think Councillor Curtis raised, yes, in the terms of reference, yes, there's the ability to call experts for whatever's required so that people don't have to sit through whole meetings that are of no interest to them, but where we've got expertise, we can call them in. In terms of community engagement, yes, we're very keen that the Friends organisation is the community engagement. It is the community's nature reserve. We're managing it on their behalf. So yes, we would encourage that organisation to sort of be vocal and sort of get involved. There's plenty of volunteering opportunities on the site that the Town Trust are sort of looking to coordinate. So there's the chance to get hands-on up there or to sort of contribute in whichever way people see fit. And we're looking to do that for the Friends organisations. And in terms of the level of intervention, certainly my understanding of the plan is there is no intention to do sort of whole-scale sort of changes like we've done. The big work is done. Now it's just making sure that that's sort of maintained and that the dominant species don't take over and that habitats are there. I would contend that it is quite light touch what we're proposing, and should there be any sort of change to that, we would need to come back to sort of Cabinet for its blessing. So the plan was what Natural England have accepted to sort of keep the habitats there. There is no intention to turn it into a parkland or introduce sort of big attractions or anything like that in some of the more scurrilous rumours I've heard. The intention is just to sort of keep up what we've created there in the nature reserve. So hopefully that's helpful, and I'll hand back to you, Leader.
Councillor Rock.
So, to move things forward, I was going to propose that we accept these recommendations, but I'd like to make a note of a few things. I don't know whether you need to put this in a recommendation or whether officers can note this. One is that we encourage the steering group when it's formed to have a level of community engagement. And I think we know what that means here, but I don't want to spell that out for the reasons that democratic representation and so on, but I think we know there are people who have invested a lot of time in this. Secondly, that there is a reporting back process as either I would suggest it's Cabinet at a suitable time when this form or these recommendations have been implemented, and also that we do make representations to the County Council so that no damage is done by lighting or indeed anything else, but I think lighting is what we're seeing to a scheme that we're trying to bring forward. So these could be notes to the recommendations, I would think, unless there's some other appropriate way of doing it.
Capture that in the preamble to the recommendations.
Yeah.
So I'll move it on that basis.
Excellent. And so you're proposing those recommendations. Who's seconding the recommendations? Councillor Cole. It has struck me also that we own other nature reserves that have been mentioned. The one in Ulster is owned by the District Council as well as the Welcome Hills. We probably ought to look at all of them, to be honest. If we're going to look at one, we should be looking at all of them. And that may be something we might want to do, because we work in partnership on all of them with other organisations. This is not the only one. In fact, there are others, smaller ones, dotted across South Warwickshire. It might be something that we might want to pick up on at a later stage, rather than identifying one above all the others. They all need to be looked at. Okay, so we've had a proposer and a seconder for the recommendations. We've also had some notes attached which mention community engagement, quite rightly, and also about reporting back and making sure that we monitor and look at this, and also making representations to the County Council about lights and working with the ecologists at the County Council, as we already do. Making sure that we get the best evidence and the best advice possible from all sources as we move forward. But at this stage, it is recommendations on the agreements going forward. But this is not the end of the conversation, but about the detail. Okay, so are you happy with all that going forward as the Cabinet? Okay, agreed. Thank you very much indeed for a really good debate, and thank you, Councillor Harding, for coming in and representing the Friends of the Lench Meadows, and thank you to the Friends for submitting their letter. Thank you very much, it's all appreciated. Right, the next item is back to Councillor Coucher, which is the Warwickshire, Coventry and Solihull Natural Capital Investment Strategy, which takes a look at some of the things like BNG, but from a much larger scale.
Thank you, Leader. I think this paper comes on very, very neatly, I think, after the discussion we've just had in the previous one. Clearly, I share some of the concerns I think that Councillor Harding has already advocated in relation to the whole BNG scheme. But if we are going to destroy habitats and destroy ecological areas, then we do want to have compensation elsewhere. And as a Stratford representative, I want to make sure that the maximum amount comes to Stratford District. I think it's very interesting seeing in the strategy paper that's put forward that the map that's actually on page 4, which almost reinstates the old county of Warwickshire, which is quite interesting to see, and you realise just how important Stratford District is in the context of the whole of the county. This is a scheme that's going to be utilised in terms of how we make the best use of money that either coming through what I call them biodiversity credits. There's so many of these letters at the moment, it's kind of difficult to understand all the various schemes there are, but biodiversity credits or money that's coming forward from voluntary payments as well. And I think the point that you made, Leader, in the last debate about making sure that it's not just District Council opportunities here, but there are many others who look after very important wildlife habitats within our district, and to make sure that they have opportunities potentially for receiving any money that comes forward. So, what is proposed here is that we endorse the overall strategy that we have. I think this is going to be a developing strategy as it becomes clearer exactly how this whole procedure is going to go forward. But once again, it does highlight the importance of ecology and nature, things which we are very, very keen to enhance and protect. I would move the 1 to 4 recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed. This is very, very welcome. As somebody who's worked in biodiversity for a long, long time, it is quite depressing here. It's looking at some of the statistics. The government hasn't been doing a lot of the state of nature reports. They do them every 3 to 4 years, but the last one was actually done in 2019. And that one suggested that there'd been a 13% decline in the average abundance of wildlife in the UK since the 1970s, which is quite, quite shocking. And I do know from other reports since that time that has been accelerated in more recent times. And this is despite legislation and policy to protect biodiversity and wildlife. So we really need to do it ourselves by working in partnership with a lot of other people in order to be able to move things forward. One of the things that struck me in the report was the emphasis, for example, on natural flood management, which I again endorse, using natural vegetation, because we do need to see a lot more of that across the district. It's really good that we are getting to grips with this at a local level, because we have to do it at a local level, and that we're pulling together all the partners and the stakeholders that we can across the whole of the area, the West Midlands area that's set out in that map on page 4. So we've got the recommendations 1 to 4, and that's been moved. Councillor Wally-Hoggins, do you want to move on, say anything?
Yes, I would, thank you. Just to say that it's heartening indeed to hear this Lib Dem cabinet, I'm referring to what how Councillor Couch's introduction here, making reference to and being mindful to the best use of money. Thank you.
I'm afraid I wouldn't ever endorse anything differently, to be honest. Always best use of money. I've never had a lot of money. I've always had to use it very sensibly. And I certainly endorse that. Okay, so we have, moving forward, we have the 4 recommendations. I'm happy to, Councillor Couch has already moved that. I'm happy to second that. Are we all in favour of that across the Cabinet? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on, we've got the, again, Councillor Coucher, if you can lead on this one. It's the Council's portion of the Community Infrastructure Levy receipts, and to consider to revise the approach that's going to be taken to the allocation.
Officers in my portfolio area produce an awful lot of reports for this council and for this cabinet, and I don't refer to individual officers very often by name, but I will do on this occasion, because I do think that Sarah Dillamode has done a really superb job on encapsulating the dilemma that we have in relation to how we deal with infrastructure and how we deal with SIL reports, SIL monies that come forward. We currently, at the moment, have a fairly unstructured way of dealing with SIL. It's an open bidding process, and therefore it's not surprising that when the NHS comes along, it grabs a very large amount of money, because in emotional terms, it's kind of difficult when you're trying to balance a physical village hall, possibly against the need for a diagnostic centre at the hospital, then you know which one is going to win. Since this report was produced, I have understood that we do have an infrastructure plan that was produced in 2016, and I've just gone through it today. A very interesting document, I have to say, and very little of it seems to have been implemented over the last 8 years. And it clearly desperately needs to be updated, and it will be, I think, one of our priorities going forward. We certainly need it for the local plan, but we also need it to guide us in terms of how we spend the limited money. And yes, Mrs. Wally-Hoggins, we are very, very keen to ensure that we get maximum value from money, and that money is not wasted through bidding schemes which are very, very resource intensive, use a lot of officer time, and actually don't always achieve the ends that we're looking forward. So we're proposing in this paper here that we will end the bidding scheme for SIL money. We will in fact take a moratorium for this year, because the large amount of this year's money has already been spent on Stratford Hospital, and hopefully we will accrue a little extra so that we can actually kick off the new scheme next year with a reasonable amount of money to use. I would say this doesn't affect the money that automatically goes to parish and town councils under the SIL scheme. So that is unaffected by these proposals. This is purely the residual money that we have in the past allocated as part of a bidding scheme. The way in which we are going to do it is going to be very much more evidence-based. We will be producing an infrastructure plan, which I'm sure all members will have a part to play in inputting into that, to make sure that we know what our priorities are and that we use our money wisely. And so therefore I would recommend once again that we approve the recommendations once and for all.
I have some comments to make, but also Councillor Crump, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, please. We did discuss this in detail at OSC on Friday. As Councillor Kencher knows, we've taken a strong interest on this, and I think we've been relatively supportive of the process. And we certainly think, that we feel we've got to ensure we've got a robust evidence-based process, because we know that previous reports had to be amended before they came to Cabinet, shall we say, and we'll leave it there. So we think this it's the right way. Obviously, we'll continue to scrutinise this, and some members had concerns about, we'd like an explanation at OSC regarding about withdrawing funds from a project. If the money was given to a project with certain conditions and criteria, when that threshold was or wasn't met due to changes in delivery, timescales, etc., so it no longer met the criteria, what processes would we go to potentially withdraw that funding? And I'm sure, I won't mention here now, but I'm sure you can imagine which project it may have referred to. And I can speak to Councillor Cater afterwards about this. So again, we're just concerned making sure that if money is given for a certain, with certain conditions, if those conditions aren't met, what do we do to ensure we either get the money back or the scheme is amended to ensure that conditions are met? So I think it's just get best value for money and making sure it's given for its intended purpose.
No, and a good point to make. It was quite a surprise to me to learn that the infrastructure funding statement had not been updated since 2016, so I do hope that is, because one of the things that is needed is, if we are to take an infrastructure approach, we have to look at things that perhaps have not been funded as a result of the bidding process. For example, strategic education, public transport, energy projects, and climate-related projects have not generally been covered by SIL, and there's also been funding problems with where matching funds have been required from other bodies that are not at the right stage to be able to match them at that stage. And so I think taking a much more strategic approach to allocation will mean that we're addressing key and really required infrastructure requirements rather than the ones that are at the best, most progressed for our bidding process. Councillor Curtis, you wanted to come in.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, just absolutely agreeing that we need clearly a strategic approach to infrastructure, which I believe this revised plan is going to deliver. And just with my resources portfolio hat on, I'm very pleased to see Section 531, central to ensuring the council is acting in the best interest of residents and using money responsibly to deliver the best services possible, key objectives of our council plan. I'm sure we all welcome that, but as I say, with my resources portfolio hat on, I'm particularly pleased to see that line there. Thank you.
Okay, we have, unless anybody else wants to come in, Councillor Rock.
It's just a point. I just wanted to reinforce the point that the portfolio did make, that this does not affect parishes. Their slice, which is either 25% or 15%, depending whether they've got an NDP or not, I think, is actually protected. And I think that's really important that they're getting their bit to spend locally on their determination as they wish. And I think that's really, really important. And I think this idea of not having some sort of competition and judging a competition, but rather doing it on the basis of a strategic view is actually really welcome. So I very much welcome the report and I'm prepared to second it. Thank you.
So we've had a proposer from Councillor Coucher and a seconder from Councillor Rock. Just as an aside, it is interesting that I think it's one of the select committees in Parliament have also started to say that using an open bidding process, which almost all government money is at the moment, it is not the best way of dealing with public money. It's quite wasteful. So I think there's been a rethink across the piece about the way in which open bidding works. So we've had a proposer and we've had a seconder. Are the Cabinet in favour of this recommendations? Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the officers for preparing it. Moving on to a shared prosperity fund direct award on CCTV, and this is under the Councillors Gist and Councillors Coucher. I don't know who's going to actually lead on this one at this stage.
I'm just going to say very briefly, Leader, that clearly this bid fits within the money that we have available, and I will leave it to Councillor Gist to put forward the why we should frankly spend this money in this way.
Councillor Gist.
No, thank you. I'll give Councillor Couch's voice the rest. Right, this award would be under Objective E5 of Communities in Place for Built and Landscape Environment Initiatives to Design Out Crime. DLUC have confirmed that this is an appropriate use of the funds, and just briefly, 4 areas of the service looking to benefit from these funds. There'd be 8 redeployable CCTV cameras. I think that's replacing 6 of the ones that have come to the end of their useful life. A recreation ground upgrade, 5 replacement cameras in Wood Street and Henley Street in Stratford-on-Avon town, High Street in Henley and Arden, and 2 in High Street, Bidford-on-Avon. And also a CCTV data storage upgrade. And obviously all the CCTV across the district is monitored by Stratford-on-Avon District Council. So to give some background, working with partners, the CCTV team deal with over 14,000 incidents a year. So it's not just solely criminal activity, they deal with daily welfare incidents and increasingly with environmental issues such as flooding. They also help with traffic accidents and flagging incidents to support partners. And lastly, I'd just like to emphasise the importance of our CCTV to our residents. When we ask residents, they regularly and repeatedly express support for CCTV and a desire for crime reduction in the district, which obviously CCTV contributes to. So I hope Cabinet will support the recommendations.
Have we got any comments that anybody wants to make on this one? It's just a comment that we have a specific duty as a local authority and under the Crime and Disorder Act 1998, but we also have other regulations, and more recently we've got this new serious violence duty and Martin's Law and various other legislation that we have to comply with. So I think this is a very much needed recommendation to come forward to us. We've got 3 recommendations. We've had a proposer, have we? Yes, and a seconder? Councillor Gist. So proposer, Councillor Coucher, and a seconder, Councillor Gist. Who's in favour? Everybody in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Very much appreciated the work that's been put in by all the officers on this one as well. Thank you very much indeed. The business case that was prepared was a considerable amount of work. The next one is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund Direct Award, Stratford-upon-Avon College Automotive Electric Vehicle Centre. Again, Councillor Coucher.
I'm really pleased to be able to present this proposal to you. Clearly, when we looked at the money that we had available through the Shared Prosperity Fund this year, we had this capital sum, which could quite easily have gone to support colleges outside Stratford, indeed outside Stratford district. And we were very keen to ensure that we found a way in which we could help Stratford College improve the services that it could provide. And so therefore a proposal that you took, or that we took earlier on this year, that we would ring fence the money for Stratford, I think has been vindicated, because Stratford College have come forward with a really good proposal here in terms of helping with the green agenda, with green skills. It really accords with many of the aspirations that we have as a council. So the fit is really very, very good indeed. This in training trainees in EV motors, I think will be a great asset to the district and possibly beyond the district as well. And I think I'm really pleased that we are able to support that. So I would strongly support that we do award the £625,000 capital funding grant to Stratford College on the basis of the proposal they've put forward.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm happy to second that motion. Councillor Rock, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, I've got a question which I've only just thought of. So, which is immediately worrying Councillor Coucher. But obviously this is a fantastic thing to do, and particularly with this area's automotive technology history, it's really important. However, if a young person is interested in pursuing this sort of technology, but they happen to live in the east of the district, they might find it difficult to attend Stratford College, might they not? I'm just wondering, and presumably their first choice would be to go to South Warwickshire College in Leamington. And I'm just wondering, are some of our residents losing out in some way? As you said, I haven't quite formulated the question in my mind, but I'm thinking of travel difficulties.
My recommendation always would be for prospective students to discuss that with the college, because colleges are quite creative in terms of creating transport opportunities. And yes, I think we need to be conscious that this is for the whole of Stratford district. I'm fully aware that Morton Morrell College runs a bus from Stratford up to Morton Morrell every time. I'm not aware of what Stratford College does for the east of the district, but it would be worth having that discussion.
I'll bring Councillor Crump in, but I know that when Mr Perks and myself went to Stratford College, where transport did come up, and the college is very aware of trying to make sure that that is addressed for their students that wanted to come to the college. So that was something that was definitely covered. For my part, I note that not only does this complement the low carbon ambitions of this council, but it also further complements the investment in a heat source pump workshop, which received funding from the sub-regional local skills investment fund. So actually this is now beginning to fund an expansion of the site and the equipment for a particular approach that the college can give towards low carbon, becoming a low carbon centre of excellence, which is very much appreciated. Councillor Crump.
Yeah, it's getting quite worrying. I was on the same sheet as Councillor Harding earlier. Now I'm on the same sheet as Councillor Rock. Whether the training could be initially started at Stratford and see whether it could be extended to the Leamington side, because from our part of the district, Leamington is the town that we normally radiate to. We don't usually come over to Stratford very often. So whether that could be on the agenda, whether that could be a potential, whether it could be addressed, or whether potentially if it did need further SIL funding or, shared prosperity funding, whether that could be an option that's looked at as a priority?
I'm sure that's something that we could look at in future, but this is a college. This college is Solihull and Stratford, so they do work quite, across the piece. They don't work just in Stratford; they work in Solihull and Stratford. So it is a partnership. Councillor Rock.
Yes, I don't necessarily think. I think I applaud what Councillor Crump is saying, but I think I'm suggesting we have a note on here that we encourage and monitor the take-up of this to make sure it is spread across the district. So we're supporting students and residents from across the district, which would encourage them to help with the transport, I think, as Councillor has said, and Councillor Junid. So I think we wouldn't want to find that we're only supporting students within, a 5-mile radius of the college, that they look at some mechanism to support that, because it's an important initiative. And after all, JLR isn't used to the district.
I think you'll find that the students already come from a considerable distance to the college, but it is a point that's worth taking up. So thank you very much indeed for that. We've had a proposal. I've seconded it. Is the rest of the cabinet in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That's agreed. The next item are issues arising from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Crump.
Sorry, I forgot to put the microphone on. Councillor Curtis was pleased I hadn't put the microphone on. Obviously we talked about SIL allocations, which we're supportive of. We had the police come to see us about antisocial behaviour, which again links in with our serious violence duty, and various different models. We spoke about there have been some improvements, particularly around the 101 service, that was causing residents significant problems. That seems to have improved, and anecdotally from members there, they seem to agree. Again, we're back to about reporting. We talked about serious violence duty area, about domestic violence. We're also talking about ensuring people do report and have the confidence to report and able to do so easily. We felt that members themselves have got a role in promoting various options, initiatives. There's one, Operation Resolve, which is a Home Office initiative for addressing antisocial behaviour, and I know Councillor Alcock spoke about that quite passionately, as did many, and I think that was pretty well addressed. And the other thing that talking about is quite appropriate. It's called Operation Talkative, which is a new initiative regarding knife crime, which again, whilst it's not a high problem in our district, it is still a problem, and we need to sort that out. We've also spoken about, in previous allocations of money, about diversionary tactics, and obviously the £10,000 and the £15,000 that have come from the Peace and Crime Commission and the government, again, will help this. So again, we need to make sure we're using that money wisely, and it would be good to see how and where that money is spent. So the police did get a strong message from ourselves, but again, we do need to work as partners, and again, tell the members of the public what things are doing, because often things are happening, and sometimes the police's communication isn't as best as it should be. They are starting to raise their game a bit, but we've got a duty to help as well, so I think that's quite important. We've had the task and finish groups. The Housing Association one, that's been a really positive one, probably one of the best ones for a while. We might have potentially have a permanent subcommittee or working group to continue to monitor housing associations on a regular basis, rather than just coming up on a yearly basis. Not far off completing it, but we've done a lot of work on that. So thanks to Annette and Howard, who have been stars. Obviously, Howard has been trying to herd cats to try and get us to agree. And he's done an excellent job there. And the public houses task and finish group, that is very close to being finished. but we're also potentially looking on assets of community value in communities, you know, obviously the pubs, etc., post offices, community centres, etc. There's things that have come out from that, so that's worked really well. And then we're looking at the work plan, potentially to look at highways issues, and then we've got potential constitutional query that we'll be speaking to ordinance standards about. It's to do with substitutes on OSC, because sometimes availability can be difficult, particularly with childcare or school holidays. So it's just some thoughts that have come out, and yeah, a really positive meeting. And I think that the most positive one was around the civil allocations. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the Cabinet on any of that report? Thank you very much indeed. That's noted. Sorry, Councillor Passingham.
Of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee as well, and we did discuss briefly the Climate Change Panel minutes and the fact that there's the schedule of actions has got an extra column in which is due date stroke status, and there's an awful lot of ongoing and to be confirmed in that column, and well, I particularly was worried that the climate emergency was declared 5 years ago. Less than 1 year ago, a climate change officer was appointed. There's a lot of catching up to do, and it is an emergency. There's a lot of things to do. And is there enough resources in that department to cope with all the things that the council is committed to?
No, a good point. It is 5 years, and I'd say we shared a climate change officer with the Warwick District Council for a long time, until about a year ago. I have to say, the Eleanor Warren is actually doing a tremendous amount of work, a lot of which is not yet reported, but will be reported fairly soon. So a lot of the actions, I think you will see some work coming through from her. But it is a point we could do with more resources right across the piece, and that might be a message that ought to go to government about local government finance, quite frankly. And also being able to have more than 1 year at a time financial settlement, which would give us more certainty going forward. But it's a point well made. Thank you. Moving on, we've got the Cabinet committees. There were none to report on. And then we've got en bloc items. Here we've got the whole series, and unless a request has been made to myself, and they haven't, about any of those items to be discussed before the meeting, then the Cabinet Work Programme, the Climate Change Panel and the Stratford-on-Avon Market Forum are to be noted at this stage and approved en bloc, unless, say, we've had no other recommendation for discussion at that to come forward. Part F is other matters. Urgent business. I don't think we've got any urgent business, and there is nothing that has arisen on which we need to exclude the public from any discussion. So that really I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
I'm a bit okay against because